Tonight, 7 Eastern on ESPN, a huge game for Alabama against number 12 Florida, and the focus on the decision by Coach Anthony Grant at a time his team needs victories and badly. Let's say good day to ESPN college basketball reporter Andy Katz, ESPN analyst Jimmy Dykes, who is working that Bama-Florida game this evening. He's in Tuscaloosa. And to Paul Feinbaum, whose program is heard on the Paul Feinbaum Radio Network and on Sirius XM. Gentlemen, it's good to have you here. Jimmy, you are right there. Give us the latest from your understanding. Will the two top players on this team remain suspended tonight? What do we know about tonight?
Well, what we do know is Andrew Steele and Trevor Relaford have been reinstated. I just stepped away from Alabama's game day shoot-around practice, and I do believe Anthony Grant has the attention of his team. That's a very sharp, very attentive group out there right now. I believe whatever message Anthony Grant was trying to get across to the two players that he brought back, Relaford and Steele, has been sent and has been received. Those two guys were the first two on the floor about 30 minutes before their practice began. They've been the two leaders out there in everything they've done. And I agree with everything that Billy Donovan said. Anthony Grant is a guy that he is going to take absolutely no shortcuts in how he's going to build this Alabama basketball program. Jimmy, even if it costs him an NCAA berth this year.
Might come to that, but Jimmy, do we have any idea what the team rules were that were violated that caused him to basically ship three guys home from Baton Rouge before the game?
We have no idea. They've been very closed-mouthed about it. Anthony Grant received the information he told us on Saturday. I did the game Saturday. He said, I received the information by phone. Once we got to Baton Rouge late Friday night, I made the decision Saturday morning to send them home, and those three guys had a long car ride with the graduate assistant coach from Baton Rouge to Tuscaloosa on Saturday morning.
That would be a long ride. Paul Feinbaum, what's the tenor of the reaction that you're hearing?
Well, Alabama fans, Bob, have taken time out from celebrating two national championships, one on the field and the other 2 weeks ago in recruiting, to even notice this story that Jimmy's talking about.
So what are you really saying
fact,
here? Because it's basketball, it's barely a blip on the radar.
Until this happened, yes, Bob, and I think everyone on this panel knows that pretty well, particularly Jimmy. It's interesting, though, that fans here do understand discipline, and they like what Anthony Grant is doing. Will they like it at the end of the year if the Tide doesn't make it to another national championship? It's been, I think, 5 years since they've been there. But so far, so good. And on our talk show yesterday, it was universally, the fans here were universally behind Anthony Grant.
Andy, how is this rippling through the game right now? Other coaches, other ADs watching a coach make what, from the outside, it's easy to label this a principled stand. And if we want to, let's label that for the sake of argument right now. How's this playing?
Universally applauded, and I think a lot of that has to do with the character of Anthony Grant. Throughout the course of his career as an assistant at Florida, as a head coach at VCU, and now at Alabama, he has been a high-character coach. And what's interesting here in this scenario, first of all, Anthony did tell me that these are three separate sort of incidents and suspensions. Mitchell suspended for something different. Obviously, JaMychal Green is different because he's being still held out. And the two players, Relaford and Steele, who are expected to at least be in uniform and possibly play tonight, they were for a third issue. And what's interesting with Andrew Steele, and this is why it's a very strong message, is that Andrew Steele just came back about a month ago from concussion symptoms. He had been working as a scout team, basically a manager, because he had been forced to shut down last June because of those symptoms, forced to retire from the game. And then Anthony Grant approached Andrew Steele when they found out that he could go through some medical testing, improve his vitamin D count. There's a chance he could come back. And they celebrated the fact that he could come back. And I just talked to Anthony, coincidentally, last week, and Andrew Steele about him playing and what the key role has been on this team. He had a big shot to help them beat Ole Miss, and he had really been sort of the catalyst in them coming back to try to make an NCAA tournament berth. And now for him to discipline him and suspend him for that game against LSU, you know that this had to be a serious infraction, that he was not going to sort of take any shortcuts, not hold any player in any kind of sort of different light by making sure that he disciplined the one player that he had been basically celebrating for his return.
Jimmy, we heard you say at the very top of our tease before we began the program, off of Saturday's broadcast, we are watching their season, meaning Alabama's season, change before our eyes. You're a former coach. Talk about what you have to do if you're Anthony Grant, not just the administrative side, but dealing with the young men who are left and what you're left to fill in terms of points, rebounds, and just stuff on the floor.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, this decision was totally Anthony Grant's. I asked him point blank, man to man in his locker room Saturday night, were you told to make this decision? He said, I was not. This was all on me. Anthony Grant knows exactly how he wants to lead and build this program. And I think more importantly than anything else, or as important, is the message that he's sending to his young guys that are going to be here for another 3 years. There's a right way and a wrong way to do things now in Alabama basketball, and Anthony Grant is not going to waver from it. So what does he do tonight with a Florida team that comes in, I think, in a little bit of desperation mode themselves? They're very secure in their NCAA berth, but they are slipping from a high seed as a 3 or 4 and starting to drop right now after back-to-back losses. So this is an Alabama team. You cannot make up for the loss of JaMychal Green and Tony Mitchell in this ball game. Their size, their experience, their scoring ability on an Alabama team that has struggled to score all season long. So what does Alabama do tonight? I think they're going to have to play small. They're going to have to press. They're going to have to try to get the game going back and forth. And I fully anticipate this to be a rocking environment tonight. I think the Alabama fan base, as Paul mentioned, I believe, they understand and they appreciate winning championships, but they also understand and appreciate doing things the right way and discipline and how you build a program. They've seen it from Nick Saban. I think they see the same thing right now from Anthony Grant. And I think Florida is stepping into a very hostile environment tonight of a fan base that's going to appreciate what Anthony Grant has done and the effort that these kids are going to bring.
Gee, Paul, it has all the makings of a fairy tale ending this evening.
It does, and you can't forget the intersection of these two programs. As you mentioned, Bob, Anthony Grant was in line to take over for Billy Donovan. Remember a couple of years ago after the back-to-back national championships, Billy took the job with the Orlando Magic, and everyone here believes that Jeremy Foley had already tabbed Anthony to be the head coach there. So there is epic drama here tonight.
Andy, where is this Bama team on the Monopoly board of March? Where do they stand? How close? Where on the bubble are they? And that's a tough calculation because the committee, if these suspensions carry on, will take the absence of these players into the tournament certainly into consideration. But where do they stand right now?
Well, actually, Bob, they will, but these are not injuries. And the selection committee will certainly look at suspensions a little bit differently because these are coach and administration decisions at times. And you're not going to get rewarded for winning games, or I should say, or you're not going to get penalized or taken away from losing games when you had suspended players. I mean, you're basically going to be like, this is the team that you had, so you shouldn't be rewarded, because you didn't have these players. And so Anthony Grant personally will certainly be celebrated that he made these decisions, but Alabama's record is Alabama's record, with or without these guys. And they lost to LSU. If they lose this game to Florida, they're certainly going to be in trouble. Now, they did have 2 wins last week over Ole Miss and Auburn, wins that they should have if they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Early in the season, they won the Puerto Rico Tip-Off Classic by beating a Purdue team that's on the bubble like they are. They've got more work to do. They obviously have some more opportunities and certainly will as they go forward into the SEC tournament. But they are squarely a team that needs to get some things done over the next 2.5 weeks to impress upon the selection committee that they are worthy on March 11th to being in the NCAA tournament.
Fair to say, Andy, they probably have to get to the SEC semifinals to really merit consideration?
Well, I think it all depends on who they beat. It's a classic case of an unbalanced schedule. This happens in a lot of different leagues. We're seeing this with South Florida in the Big East, where they have 8 wins, but they haven't beat any of the top teams in the league. It all depends on who they beat. If they get far and maybe some of these other teams pull an upset of Georgia, Tennessee, or South Carolina or something like that, that's not going to give them as many points for the selection committee. They're going to have to knock off, maybe not Kentucky, but Florida, Mississippi State, or Vanderbilt, one of those teams along the way somewhere as they go forward into the SEC tournament.
Paul, to those who would say, well, here's college basketball, and we certainly know what the issues are. Second half of this program, we're going to talk about some of the problems involving the University of Connecticut. For all the issues that are out there with college basketball, here is an example of a coach standing on principle, using Alabama as an exemplar. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a good story, and we don't get very many of those. Interestingly, Bob and some of the panel may frown at this, but on our show yesterday, we started talking about discipline in this issue, and a couple of callers brought up Bear Bryant in Alabama, of all places, suspending Joe Namath nearly 50 years ago. So people here do relate to that, and I think Anthony Grant has already come out a winner here. But as Andy mentioned, without going to the tournament, I'm not sure how much of this conversation will help him in the offseason.
Jimmy, how?
But you know one thing, Bob, I'll tell you this: we had a case earlier in the season. Mick Cronin was celebrated of Cincinnati for the way he handled the suspensions, or at least the fight, right after the game on December 10th. The way he handled it. There was some criticism about the number of game suspension, but those guys were sat, and Mick, went forward even with the guys, and then a depleted roster. And here we have a second case where a coach is doing the right thing and making sure that they disciplined players that deserve it and choosing character within the program over wins and losses.
All right, gentlemen, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time. Paul Feinbaum.
To the Paul Feinbaum Radio Network.